All right, we are here with Robert Diken for the XMarks Gallery Talk at M Galleries. Hi, Robert.
Hi, Frank. How are you?
Pretty well, pretty well. Thanks for doing this tremendous exhibition. You want to talk a little bit about your background?
Well, first of all, I want to thank you for having me at this exhibition, which is very cool. And,
yes, thank you.
It's always a challenge to work with you. And
hey,
in a
that's
very
what I
good
do.
way. In a very good way.
That's what I love, challenging artists, for
Anyway,
sure.
my background. A late blooming artist, I guess, in my life. I was mostly in the business world and had a job where I managed a lot of clients in the insurance setting and did a lot of traveling and loved to take photographs and things like that. But
Right.
when I had a chance to retire slightly early, I decided I want to go back and do something on a hobby basis just to stay busy, and decided to harken back to my days when I was a kid, when I liked to draw and doodle and have fun. And I said, I'm going to start painting again. I'm going to start drawing again or doing something. And that started kind of my discovery into kind of where I ended up now, kind of 11, 12 years later, creating art and having shows and things like that. So it's been an interesting kind of second career, second life in my trajectory.
Yeah, riffing off of that, the pieces behind you, can you talk a little bit about this being the inspiration for a lot of the work you do?
Yeah.
And this is like the first time you've shown photography, right?
I've never shown photography. I take a lot of photographs. I use a lot of photographs as inspiration for actually creating 2D or 3D art. But these are photographs I took of graffiti art, obviously. And the reason I decided to use these in the show is because when you and I were talking about curating a show and what we should do, I thought about how much I love graffiti art and appreciate it more than I ever thought I would. Okay, so these are pictures that were taken in a bathroom, in bathrooms in New York City at clubs where my son played a lot of music, and I would go into the bathrooms and I'd see this crazy art. I'd just take crazy pictures of them all, and then I'd take pictures of art in New York City, and I just got into the history and started appreciating this concept of markings, making markings, right? That's the key, right? That's the kind of really it all started off.
Today, someone came in and asked if this was CBGBs. So is any of these that?
No, it's not. No. It would be things like the Mercury Lounge or the Cake Shop, small little places where you go into the basement. They'd have a show down there, and they'd have these bathrooms, and this is kind of captured here. So not CBGBs.
Yeah.
But probably very similar kind of places.
Right. The same idea.
Yeah. So this became the genesis for the show of trying to express how much I like graffiti art, and so this is the first time I'm showing photographs of them. On the back wall there is a video I took, which also was all graffiti art taken in Jersey City at a Pep Boys automobile parts store that was going out of business. And I didn't do any of this art here, but I captured it in a 2-week show that was done when they vacated the place, and they allowed all these great graffiti artists to come in and just have a blast. And so those two pieces made me feel that this would be a good anchor for the show. And then when I started looking around a little bit about the kind of other art that I actually do besides photography, taking photographs is, I have a lot of ceramic work that's all abstract. I have a lot of other materials as well, acrylics, paint chips, digital work.
Can we go to one in the corner?
Sure, and all work that kind of, I would say, made me think about the show as my own markings in the way I create my art, and I'm leaving these markings on my world here in some way, shape, or form. I never really thought about those as a collective of any sort. This is where I always enjoy working with you, because you push me into these corners of figuring out a way to take the holism of my work and trying to skinny it down into a show. Because I do so many different things, I never really feel like they all fit together or not, but this is the second show I've done where they kind of surprisingly fit together.
Yes, right.
And it was a challenge. It's never really easy to curate an art show, but for me, it really made me think about each of the pieces, what we're trying to express here. And if people came into the gallery, would they feel that these are, you know, little buried treasures of markings that I've made in my artistic career, I guess. Yeah.
Right. Well, that's one of the questions I like to ask. Like, what other media do you like to work in? They're all represented here, basically, right?
Yeah,
So-
I mean, I actually like to do them all. I'm a little bit of an iterative worker. I like to work in a certain zone of medium, and I'll work in there for a while, and then I'll stop it completely and go someplace else. I'll go into acrylic, or I'll go into digital, or I'll go into, I even do some oil painting as well. I'm not sure there's any oil here at the moment, but I do a lot of collage work, block print. So I get into these jags of,
Yeah.
you know, episodic, doing this area here, and then either I get bored with it or that's enough, and then I go into something else. And I guess when I first started my art journey, I thought I was gonna be a watercolorist and do landscapes. So I guess I didn't end up there. I still like to do those, but I've now found that I guess I evolved a lot of ways in my art. You never know where it's gonna take you, and I think I've more evolved into this abstract mark making, I don't know, just taking scraps and putting them together and not really thinking about them too much.
Well, let's talk about, let's go to the other side of the room here, because it has those examples, I feel like very illustrative of that idea about putting scraps together. So this is so these pieces, can you talk about this one in particular? 'Cause I
Yeah,
feel like-
that might have started me off a lot on abstract art, that piece right there. And so that was a landscape that went sideways. And it wasn't coming out very good. And I decided to take, I had my palette had all the paint all over the palette. And I said, okay, this enough of this one. I'm gonna scrape it off, and I'm gonna start something new. And I scraped it off, and I dumped it on a piece of paper there, and I walked away, and I came back and I said, well, it's kind of interesting.
Yeah, right.
And so all I did was, I then, I think I might have redumped it on this piece of paper, but I just literally dumped it on the paper, and I didn't mess around with it much, and I just took a spray can and I sprayed it, and that's the art. So, yeah, it's like it would be like a byproduct of the real art I was trying to make. And I feel that there's a lot of art that I make that always comes out that way. So that piece is a byproduct. And this is the same kind of thing, basically
Yeah.
paint chips that I couldn't bear to throw away.
Unintentional.
Unintentional art.
And repurposed.
Repurposed, and to me, it just seems like fun because I'm actually trying to create something else, and something else is happening next to me that I don't realize that there's either material there or a piece of work there. So this back here, the backing that I put it on is really like a wax paper. It comes in a ream, and you just use it for your palette, and then when you're done, you just throw it away. So these were all made as a result of me making something else. Every single one of them were made by making something else. And so, again, I didn't really purposefully make these to be art, but I decided that I've had many of these. I just throw them on the floor, and I don't know what to do with them. And you know,
I
it's
love
just,
them.
but there's spontaneous art that happens as a result of not really thinking too much, which I'm really good at.
Well, that's what I love how I describe the show, is that this is the whole package of the process of making.
Correct.
You know, and I love each step is kind of whole, you know, in its idiom.
Right.
You know, and I love seeing I'm a big process guy, so I love seeing the pieces within the pieces, and you know, these are great examples of that.
Right. So I've taken a lot of my work now out of my portfolios, and I've actually re-looked at them in a new way to determine, is there anything else I could do with these that would be different in kind of the way I'm working now? Should I cut these up and make them into a collage? Should I do something else with them? Should I mount them differently? Should I throw them away? But there's a lot of work that you don't realize you create, and then you don't really love it so much, or you just put it away, and then you find out later on, you look at it and say, this is better than I thought, or different than I thought, and I could use this.
That's right.
In
It can
another
be
way.
redeemed. Yeah.
Yeah.
I think that's universal among all different,
Probably.
among different art forms. We were having a poetry workshop just last night, and we were talking about old pieces of poetry, that when you write something, we were discussing whether or not you should go back and edit the work or leave it as it is. And that was exactly our experience with some of the writers, was that they would put work away, not really feeling that committed to it. And then they would go back to it and realize, wow, I really had something there. And they were grateful that they didn't throw it away.
Right.
Frank always tells me never throw anything. He gets so angry when sometimes the work won't go well for me.
Yeah.
And I have limited space in my apartment. I don't have like a designated art studio. So I will just throw things away that aren't working for me. And he's like, do not do that.
Yeah, don't throw anything away.
Right.
Yeah,
Of course, when you're
literally
the artist,
hurt.
you
It
always
literally
think
hurts
everything's
me.
great, but it's
Yeah.
not, you know.
Right.
Because I know it's all about this, and I think we've kind of discussed this about this embedded time and history within these works that they can get translated into other things. Like I feel like it's like you're literally wasting time when you throw away these things, because if you put all this effort and all this work, and it pains me the thought of the loss of that. Like I feel like things can be redeemed. And but this process your work kind of reminds me of Anselm Kiefer. So Anselm Kiefer is a German artist that does these gigantic works where he puts this, like, it's the patina of debris and paint and material, and it literally falls off the canvases, and he reuses the chunks of debris. So like your pieces are like a microcosm of that. He just that's his whole process. It's like he like takes pieces and moves pieces all over, and it creates this like amazing surface. That you could never get doing another process.
Yeah. I'm happy. I'm really happy I stumbled into this kind of thing, because I guess I feel that I'm totally free now to make a lot of things that I would never have imagined at the beginning of my idea of creating art. I just thought it was going to be traditional, making beautiful things that people enjoyed, but now I'm free to do anything I want, and I feel like I'm free to make a lot of mistakes and try to recover from those mistakes. I think art is only problem solving. That's all it is, right? So you get into trouble and you try to get out of trouble, and that's sometimes where the art lies.
We laugh because we know what you mean.
That's right.
Exactly. It's like, we had this show last week, Frank, Simon and I and John Marin had the show.
The Co-9 collab,
Co-9 collab, and we did a show on Wabi Sabi, which is, I would say, a lot of my work is grounded in that kind of aesthetic as well. Asymmetrical, rustic, unfinished, impermanent.
Mine is very wabi-sabi.
Yeah. So that's another kind of idea as well. I have spent some time working with a lot of Japanese clients in my business day. So I visited Japan. So I have that I guess it would call it the Eastern aesthetic. I love the beauty of that style of landscape or architecture or building style.
I feel like these sculptures in the middle represent that the best. Maybe you want to move to that real quick, and we can talk about that.
Sure.
So these pieces, especially the tall one, I feel like illustrates that sensibility. So can you talk about the process of making these, and actually the process of making this series too, right?
I guess,
also very interesting.
Yeah, I guess if people said to me, Bob, you have to make one kind of art, and you have to stick with one. Unfortunately, it would be ceramics. I would do ceramics only. I would abandon other things. Unfortunately, they would go by the wayside.
I feel that.
Because I love to work in the tactile world, building things with my hand, and so all these are great for that, to get your hands in the mud, so I just like to make, again, forms that start with some general idea, but they just kind of happen as you move along in the process. A couple of these were collaborations. I think I told Frank that this one here is a collaboration with two other people that I made, and the one in the corner is also a collaboration I made with two other artists. And we literally, these were my take-away pieces we made. I think we made either 9 or 12 pieces altogether. We all took back the ones we started out originally. But the idea was to take these forms of some kind, we extruded all this clay, and then I started the process of making the first attempt to make something out of it. But then the next class or the next time we got together, I gave it to somebody else, and they worked on it. And I could not inform that person, advise that person. That person could not ask me a question about what to do. It's up to them. And that was handed to the third person. So we're passing these all around, and we all touched them all like 3 or 4 times. And the person that started it got a chance to either glaze it or make the final finish and get it fired, and then take it home. So there's other pieces in this series that are in other parts of the country now, because these people are away.
So these pieces that are in the show currently are pieces that you had, that final touch of surface treatment?
Correct. Yeah, and it was also the beginning stages of kind of how it looked. I have another video series I could share with you on that. So the basic form to start off was kind of pretty much what that particular artist felt in the direction it should go.
Yes.
And then every time from there, it wasn't like tearing it apart, it was building upon it.
Right.
Building upon it, like
Right.
either carving it or, this particular artist was probably really good, Linda was probably really good at doing some of this carving.
Yes.
I was really good at cutting holes and really making a mess, and other people were good at attaching things. And then again, this was my final piece that I did, that's the final piece that I did. These were not collaborations, this one here, nor the one in the corner.
Oh, this one's lovely back here.
Sorry?
This one's lovely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it looks very, Asian.
Yes, yes. Somebody, when I was here, Frank, for the opening, the gentleman that came in here and said, it reminded him of a Frank Gehry building.
Oh.
Oh, yes.
Never thought about it. Never crossed my mind.
Yeah,
It's-
and I love architecture, I
But,
didn't make that
yeah,
connection.
so that's what he said, yeah.
That's beautiful.
So said it looked like a Frank Gehry building?
That's what he
Yes.
said, yeah.
That's wonderful.
Yeah, isn't it?
That's a high compliment.
Oh, and get what's on the wall too, because I like this very much.
I do too.
This is very, Simon Kellerish to me.
Yeah, Simon helped me, he didn't help me, literally helped me, but his influence of
It-
getting
it
to know him a
definitely
little bit,
shows.
particularly because he uses the native
The
clay,
wild clay.
So I think that is actually Duclay clay.
Duclay.
Oh,
Clay,
is it?
as they
Very-
call
it's
it,
Duclay from Ducray?
Ducray, yeah,
Yes.
that's what they call it. And then he uses, I mean, they do have some other glazes there, but his
He's a
style is
big
basically
ash
wood ash glaze.
Yes.
And, that could, depending on how thick you put it on, it can come out in a lot of different ways. So, I just went for that, making 2 tiles that kind of seem to talk to each other a little bit, but not exactly. And then embedding some glass chips in it, and just
Oh, I love that.
letting the firing do its thing.
Mhm.
So all of this surface treatment with the blues and the greens, that's all wood ash glaze?
Yes,
Oh, see, that's lovely.
yeah, that's what
That's
ash glaze,
lovely.
yeah.
So that's the cobalt coming through
Yeah,
in the
yeah,
ash, that's
exactly,
great, I love
exactly,
that.
exactly.
Mhm.
Yeah, there's a piece up front too that I did,
Yep.
which we could take a picture of later, but.
Yeah.
It's again, I like the wood ash glaze, I like the idea that, I've been to a couple different studios, where I've made a lot of nice stuff, but it's almost like it's, there's too many choices,
Mhm.
too many glazes, like a good restaurant, just give me.
Right.
So the fact
And they're
that,
toxic.
we could work.
Yeah.
That it's a kind of a limited selection of what you could do, it actually makes it more interesting.
Mhm. Mhm.
Because then you're really working on, what does the piece look like, what does the form look like? Because you already know pretty much what the glaze is gonna do to it or not do to it. And you could do it in a big way or a little way or not any way. But I'm a big fan of actually doing a lot of ceramic work that's not glazed. So
Okay.
this is not glazed.
Mhm.
But it looks like it's got an oxide.
It's got an oxide on it, right, but it's got no other glaze, it's got no
Okay.
other glaze. This has no glaze on it at all.
It's, those are all oxides, or? is
Yeah,
that-
no, this was painted.
Oh, okay.
This was
okay.
painted
It was
and then
painted
also
after the bisque fire?
stenciled, yeah. Which is, I find fascinating.
Yes.
So what kind of paints do you use? Do you use acrylic?
Acrylic paint, you could use
Okay.
acrylic paint, or they have watercolor paint that you could use on those.
Okay. Would I would imagine that would just soak right into the material.
It does, yeah.
Does it?
Yeah. So, and this one here is nothing more than, I do I have a lot of these kind of little abstract things that are,
Well, this is the
whatever.
clay version of this painting behind us, you know, it's the scraps, you know,
exactly.
right?
This
Right.
was, I'm in a big hurry in my last class to make something before the period ends, right? And it's literally the last class. I gotta get it in, because the next time.
Trimmings, quick.
So it's basically the scraps that
Bring me
were
some
kind of
slip.
laying on my thing. I either was gonna put them in a ball and make something else later, or I said, okay, I'm just gonna cut these and I'm gonna put them together.
Frantically put them together.
And at this point in time, this is early on, I was learning how to attach things.
Yeah.
So it was really a practice piece,
Oh, see, that's.
to
what-
learn how to attach pieces and then examine how it came out in the firing.
Right.
So you get better and better at it, right? And
Yes.
technique wise, but I liked it so much.
Okay, so that's like, okay, I don't have an attachment thing, but I do this thing where I make test pieces.
Mm-hmm.
Mhm.
Frank was instructing me in clay, and he said, you know, well, why don't you make some test pieces so we could test glazes? Well, normally those are just like smooth wooden blocks. Well, I made pieces of different shapes and thicknesses. and
Textures.
Carved things into them, and
Mhm.
I gave them a bunch of different surfaces,
Mhm.
because I wanted to see how the glaze was going to
Yeah,
react to it.
exactly,
So to me,
exactly.
that's an appropriate test piece.
Correct.
And that's what that reminds me of.
Right.
Like, it's an exercise where you have to make something,
Yeah.
and you're gonna make something that is one big test
Yeah.
of your attachments.
Yeah, I could make a whole show out of these kind of little
Yeah.
things. I have a bunch of them
Yeah.
at home they're just these weird experiments that I like.
Yeah.
And, you know, it tests your ability to, well, how am I gonna shape it, you know? How's it gonna look? How's it gonna feel? Does it fit the asymmetry? You know,
Right.
very
Is
asymmetrical.
it balanced,
and-
is it not, is it,
Yeah, this is
how's it
total-
gonna
total-
stand,
total
is it gonna be
wabi-sabi piece.
stable?
Mhm.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, it's great. I like
Look
things.
at it as your digital work, so going from
Okay.
one end of the
Sure.
spectrum to the other, right?
Sure, yeah.
So yeah, so we have your digital work and then the base camp display, so we can talk about that too. So yeah, so riffing off of the mark making and the full media experience.
Yeah,
So
these-
what's the process with these?
Okay, these process is, it's basically finger art on my iPhone.
Oh, nice.
And that's all
Mhm.
it is. No stylus, no iPad.
Yeah.
It's all just made
It's
with
awesome.
my little digit finger here on my iPad. And I found this app that I used, and I was basically just doodling with it, just having fun. And you don't have to take anything out. You could sit on the couch and you could watch a basketball game or whatever, and
Right.
you're just doodling. And I also like to draw really fast pictures of people, like caricatures,
Okay.
that are not really great, but they really hone my skill to make something really fast.
Mhm.
Okay,
Because I generally like to work fast, most of my work is fast.
okay.
I don't like to belabor it for weeks and weeks and weeks, so this really lends it, you can make a piece like right, boom, boom,
Mhm.
boom. And so I make a lot of black and white pictures of people who I might see on the street, and, you know, it's like a 30-second thing, really.
Yeah.
So that's one way to use it, but the other one is just to use the technology
Yeah.
and make doodle art.
Mhm.
So this is what I did in, high school all the time, but on the side of my
Yeah.
notebook.
Oh, I remember those days.
Yeah, so I started making these, and again, a lot of times my wife is somebody that really can recognize some of this strange stuff that I do as being interesting. And I never really thought about it, because I was just making hundreds of them, making them. And I got this idea that maybe I would make them for the purposes of display or
Mhm,
selling.
mhm.
I've made a lot of greeting cards out of these, which people have
that's great.
purchased.
Yeah, I got an example right behind you.
Yeah, exactly, yeah, and I have made a couple large scale pieces
Okay.
as well, and I'm thinking about that might be the next level of creating something like this, make it a really large scale.
Mhm.
That might be interesting. I have a couple in my garden, in my property, which are larger scale, which really stand out nicely, so, yeah, so they're lots of fun. I've made many of these. These are actually printed on aluminum.
Yeah, aluminum, right.
So they're light and they're easy and they're fun.
Right. Well, what I remember having a discussion about this work, and I really loved how you put it in that it's like it gives you a way to create regardless of the situation. Sometimes you can't get into a studio, or sometimes it's difficult.
Right.
And I love that it's still a way to create something, even if you don't have you have a virtual space to work in.
Exactly. I made a piece last night, just made something like this last night on my phone, because I was just sitting there, and I took it out, and I was just making another one. I haven't even looked at it yet to see whether it's any good, but not that it has to be, because I'm not showing them all, but, yeah, so, yeah, and you, Frank, you brought this out in me in the last show. We called it Storms.
Storms, yeah.
A lot of these reminded us of storms, hurricanes, tornadoes, floods,
Yeah, this flurry,
derechos.
I felt like this flurry of mark making,
Yeah.
like this, that's what it reminded me of, this kind of flight that you're doing.
Yeah, so it's all these, as you can see, are all the marks that I've made in some way, shape, or form. Therefore, my buried treasure.
Mhm. Yes, the very treasure.
What about your choice of color when you do these? Because clearly there's no, I mean, it's not even, there's no structure. It's because you're not really, it's like you said, they're just loose doodles, but how intentional are you with your use of color, or is that just as randomized?
It's
You
pretty
just
random.
Pick something off
It's
the
pretty-
palette
yeah.
without even thinking about it?
It's pretty random. They give you
Or do
choices,
think,
I put them on
want
there.
blue, I wanna, or do you
It's
just
too,
literally
I
just
work faster
write?
than that. Whatever kind of comes up, I'll
Okay.
hit it and I'll say, oh, maybe a yellow, boom, 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 and I'll do
Mhm.
something with my finger. Green, I don't know, yeah, okay, whatever.
Okay.
And it's not intentional at all. I think I break a lot of the barriers of color blending, some of them
Okay.
are kind of,
And yet it all seems to kind of work.
this seems to work in a macro sense,
Mhm.
like it's,
Definitely, yeah.
yeah, it seems to work. Some of
And
them better than others,
Okay.
some of them better together than others.
Okay.
But I have a few, I would say, series of these where these to me are more like striking and have more nervous energy to them.
Okay.
And I have some that are more swirly and more calming and more blissful and things like that. So for this show, I felt that these would be more representative of my own marks.
Now, are those like a 1-to-1 scale? Is that the images in its entirety, or
Yes,
did you have an
pretty
image
much.
that you blew up and you took a
Pretty
section?
much. Some of these in their original form, which are really actually very beautiful, is that there's probably some white space around it,
Okay.
and there's probably, this is not so square. The actual final piece is probably not as square as these,
Okay.
but for this particular purpose, I did it this way. But if I did a bigger piece, you might see that this has its own art on the outside of it.
Yeah, you would allow for
Yeah,
that
like
to
a border kind of
A
thing.
border,
Yeah,
okay.
yeah.
That's very interesting.
Yeah. So, and
I'm sorry.
go ahead, please.
I was just wanting to know more with that. I'm assuming you're gonna move over to base camp, but I wanted to ask about the blocks.
Oh, yes.
Yes.
Okay.
I'm curious about those. I don't entirely understand them.
Okay.
Perfect.
Okay, wow, that's interesting. So, I told you before, I've been to Japan, and I like Asian art, I like Asian food, and I particularly like the Asian delicacy called uni. Uni is, you've probably seen it, it's kind of like a yellowish jelly-like substance that you can get at a sushi bar.
Okay.
And it's an acquired taste, but it's like a,
Is it animal derived?
yeah, it's a fish derived. It's probably like how can I say, some internal guts of the fish.
Okay.
So I'm not
Like some
describing it very
fatty
well,
layer
but it's,
or-
yeah, it's like a fatty layer. I guess it would be like a foie gras kind of thing.
Okay,
Right,
okay.
kind of that vein, that
Yes.
kind of thing.
Yes.
So it's a delicacy, and sometimes you could buy it in the supermarket if you go to an Asian supermarket. So I would go to the Asian supermarket, if I can get it fresh, then you'd get it in this little box.
Oh, that's an uni box.
It's an uni box,
Okay.
upside down, you can see here.
Yes.
Okay, but in the uni box is a little plastic tray, and then the uni's in it, and then they have a little plastic thing that goes over the top. And this is the little box that it comes in.
Nice.
And so I buy these uni boxes, and again, because I could throw anything way.
Right,
I would put them on the side and say, oh, they look like little frames to me.
they do.
Right?
But then I realized they were boxes. And I
Yeah, so they're
was-
little boxes that I
But I
bought
was
at the
a bit
grocery
curious
store.
about
And
that.
I had the uni, which was delicious. And then I figured out, what am I gonna do with these? And then these are block prints that I did, and I decided to glue these two together in
That's
this
perfect.
pairing. I think they look pretty cool, right?
Yeah, that's perfect.
And this is the same thing. This is another uni box duo
I like that one.
that has some original artwork in here. This is actually just an acrylic piece. And this actually probably was, I think this was from another much larger piece that I didn't particularly like.
Okay,
And I think I cut it up into pieces.
okay.
And I said, there's a couple pieces here I do like.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
And so I decided to
keep
toss
the
them
good
in
stuff.
here. Keep the good stuff, right? And
Yeah.
put it in here, and I said, oh, that's pretty good. So, the scraps.
Right.
Comes back to that, yeah.
And then it's
Recollaging.
a matter of how to mount it, how to frame it, not to frame it. Actually, before the show, these were not framed,
Mm.
and they were sitting on a shelf, which
Okay.
can also be used that way as well.
Right.
But I thought for the show, maybe to give it some background, makes it a little bit more
Yeah,
dramatic.
that's nice.
Yeah, so, well, do you want to go into base camp? What is base camp about?
What is Base Camp about? Well, Base Camp is the name of my studio and gallery. I'm located in Metuchen, New Jersey. Base Camp is at my home studio. And the reason I called it Base Camp was because when I first thought about the idea of a term, and I really like to work with other people in collaborative ways, or together in a collective, or something like that. And I thought about actually starting a place that would actually have people working together in a place. That didn't quite come to fruition, but I love the concept of people gathering together and preparing themselves to go higher.
Mm.
And base camp is the term they use, obviously, for when mountain climbers go climbing. And where do they go? They go higher. And they use base camp to acclimatize and to work together, and
That's where they start.
that's where they start, and the whole thing. So to me, base camp is a great word for kind of working together, preparing together, a basis from which you could go elsewhere.
And it's
So-
also when you've gone out into the wilderness and you need to return
Correct.
to something more familiar,
Right.
and homey, and
Right.
restful.
Right.
Sometimes I find that sometimes when you're leveling up,
Yeah.
it's stressful.
Yeah.
And it's nice to kind of run home to mama, so to speak.
And
So you're running back to base camp. I kind of like that.
And I love reading about people who like to mountaineer. I'm not a
Yes.
mountain climber myself.
Yes.
I don't do that, but I'm fascinated with the people that do it, and I'm fascinated with the stories about how they work together, and they go to base camp, and they have all this language about it and everything. And I can't believe that people do that. But so I think it's a nice name. It feels good to me. It seems genuine to me.
And communal.
Yeah, what I'm
It's
trying
nice.
to do. Yeah.
It's nice. There's a lot of separation among artists. I've
Yeah,
noticed.
base
It's
camp is also
nice to
at my
find people that
location.
work
One thing that's
together.
difficult to show in a gallery show is actually the beginning stages of all my art was from my garden at my home in Metuchen. And I have a beautiful property, I have a greenhouse, I have a koi pond, and I have, so it's very, again, going back to the idea that I've been to Japan and like Asian art, it's very serene, and I would call it my Japanese garden. And so I always like to do landscaping, and from the landscaping, the texture and the digging in the dirt, a lot of the whole ceramic thing where it comes out. It was really where I started my foundation for creating beautiful things. And so if you look at my website, you could see in the back, my inspiration is my property. And that's just another form of art that I do. I also do bonsai art. So I have bonsai trees in my property, so I'm kind of,
I know.
Yeah, and
I'm
that's
kinda-
I'm
kinda-
like envious.
I'm
like
kind of all
rolling
over the
right
place.
now.
I am really all over the place, and I often have said, oh, I have to stop. I have to do just one thing. But I think it's inevitable that I'm just going to continue to do all these things. It's just the way it is.
Right.
I'm not going to stop,
Mhm.
and I think it's okay.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah, it is okay.
particularly when you get bored, you can bounce from one thing to another.
Yeah, And it keeps you
And,
fresh.
and every one of these, have taught me lessons about the kind of art it is and how do you do it. And I like to do the research behind the scenes, like what materials do you use, how do you use them, how to mount them, and all this stuff is just so rich information.
Don't you find that when you learn about something new, that you immediately try to find ways to translate that new information over into the other mediums that
Mhm.
you're already engaged in?
Mhm.
So you end up with these wonderful hybrids
Yeah,
No, for
yeah,
sure.
yeah,
Yeah.
of
yeah.
processes
Yeah.
and materials and things that aren't traditionally put together.
Yeah, yeah. And now I appreciate going to museums and galleries more than ever because I can understand why people make things.
Mhm,
Yeah.
mhm.
Not exactly why they made that thing, but I can understand the whole process. People go through this interesting
Yeah, it's like making
dynamic.
in general, you start
Yeah.
to understand better.
Yeah, so it really helps to go see other people's work.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah, and you can go to www.basecamp.art,
correct.
right? Yeah, to see the website and check out what you do. All right. Any other questions for Robert? I think this is probably a good place to start.
That was lovely.
That's a really, I think it's a really lovely place to end. So,
Great.
yeah, thank you, Robert. Robert Diken's XMarks at M Galleries.
Thank you.
Thank you, Robert. Thank you
Thank
so
you.
much.
Thank you, thanks for having me, appreciate it.